Commander Ryan sat alone in the cold metal room. The heater buzzed softly in the corner, but the walls still felt cold. Dust covered the shelves, the floor. Even the plate he hadn't moved since breakfast. Life on the mining outpost was quiet. Maybe too quiet. Ever since the war ended, Ryan had stayed away from people. He didn't talk much, didn't smile, didn't even try to decorate the place. He lived among tools, fuel, and silence. But today, something changed. The delivery shuttle landed outside, its engines roaring, and a small figure stepped out. Ryan opened the door slowly. Looking down, there she stood, tiny, quiet, and looking up at him with large black eyes. She wore a faded gray uniform. Sleeves too long for her thin arms. Her skin was pale silver, her hair short and blue, her face unreadable. He looked at the file in his hand. Zira. He read the name out loud. Species, Lyrian. Age, unknown. Size, small. Status, servant class, hired through a contract he barely remembered signing. "I guess you're my new maid," Ryan muttered, stepping aside. She gave a small bow, walked in, and stood silently near the wall. No questions, no greetings, just stillness. Ryan watched her as she slowly looked around the room. Her eyes scanned every corner like she was memorizing it, like a soldier learning a battlefield. Then, without a word, she walked to the sink, and walked to the sink. And no, Sue, and no Sue, and leaves a rich. And no Sue Sicketer. No Sicketer. Her eyes scanned. L.C. The Y. Mars Ka. No Sue, no Sue, no. L. Sue, no. No Sicketer, Palisade. Bilicit Sikaz, my requites and my real S. Berimided to me, sit cud. We see say light is sit today's kai to set secret kek I say lights sit to sit could sit to goes lead to give it sits it met it is sit and this creek that's what the best we got other started cleaning. Not a sound came from her lips. Ryan sat back down, watching her. Confused and a little uneasy, he expected talking. Maybe even complaints about the mess, but Zira made no noise. Only soft movements, cleaning the dishes, wiping the dust, organizing tools. There was something strange about her, something to calm. To quiet, her steps were light, almost like floating. And she avoided making eye contact. Once, when he accidentally stepped too close, she froze, her small hands shaking. He stepped back, and she relaxed a little. That's when he noticed a scar on her neck. Barely visible under her collar, he didn't ask, but he didn't forget it either. When the work was done, she stood near the door of the storage room. "That's where you want to sleep?" he asked, surprised. She nodded once, her eyes still avoiding his. "There's a guest room," he said, pointing, but she bowed slightly and walked into the storage room instead. Ryan stood there for a long moment, unsure what to say. He sighed and went back to his chair. The silence returned, but it felt heavier now. Later that night, Ryan heard something, a soft sound, like a whisper, coming from the storage room. He stood quietly near the door and listened. It was Herzer murmuring in her sleep, maybe talking to someone only she could see. The words were not in English, soft and broken, but filled with pain. He didn't open the door, just stood there in the dark. Then he heard a soft sob. It stabbed his heart in a way he didn't expect. She wasn't just a helper, not just a maid. She was broken like him, but unlike him, she still had the strength to keep working. The next morning, Zira was already up, sweeping the hall quietly. She didn't look tired, but there were dark circles under her alien eyes. Ryan placed a warm cup of coffee on the table and pushed another cup toward her. She looked at it, then at him, confused. "For you?" he said simply. She shook her head and backed away, hands raised slightly in fear. Ryan blinked. Then slowly pulled the cup back. "Okay," he whispered. "Maybe later." That whole day. He kept glancing at her, and every time she was working, washing, fixing, scrubbing, folding, without rest. But behind her quiet movements was something else's sadness he couldn't explain. And Ryan, a man who had forgotten how to care, found himself wondering, who was she before this? Why was she so afraid of kindness? And why, now, did he feel this strange warmth in his chest whenever he looked at her? Zero moved like a shadow in the quiet room. She never made a sound. Not even when she dropped a spoon by mistake. Ryan watched her from the corner of his eye, pretending to read a report. But his mind wasn't on the screen, was on her. The way she worked, calm and careful, like she was afraid to disturb the air. The way she touched things so softly, like everything was breakable, including herself. It had been 3 days since she arrived. 3 days of silence, of distant glances, and careful steps. 3 days since Ryan started wondering why her silence said more than words ever could. She didn't speak, but he heard her. He heard it in the way she folded his jacket and left it neatly by his chair. He heard it in the way she placed a small energy snack near his console when he worked late. He heard it when she stood near the broken heater, not asking, just quietly fixing it. Her hands moved with skill more than just a maid. That was clear. One evening, Ryan returned early from the dock. He found Zero standing still by the window, staring at the stars. She didn't notice him at first. Her eyes looked far away, almost lost, as if searching for something or someone out there. He cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle her. Zero turned quickly, head bowed, stepping back in fear. "Hey," he said softly. "It's all right. I didn't mean to scare you." She gave a small nod, then quickly picked up the cleaning rag and started wiping the already clean table. Ryan didn't stop her, but he walked over and sat nearby. "You like the stars?" he asked. She paused, then nodded once, not meeting his gaze. "They remind me of home, too," he whispered, almost to himself. She glanced at him for a second, just one, but in that second, he saw something. A flicker of pain, of memory, of connection. Later that night, he placed a tray with 2 plates on the small table, one with his dinner, and one with a smaller portion. A quiet invitation. Zero walked in, saw the tray, and froze. She looked at him, then the food, then back again. "No poison," Ryan said with a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. Zero stepped back. Her arms crossed tightly. Her lips trembled like she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Then she bowed low, turned, and walked quickly to the storage room. Ryan sighed, sitting alone at the table again. But before he could take a bite, he heard soft footsteps returning. Zero entered slowly, eyes on the floor, and sat cross-legged beside the table, not at it. Just beside. Ryan didn't say a word, just pushed the small plate toward her again. This time, she took it. They ate in silence. The soft clinks of spoons, the only sound between them. After dinner, she took both plates and began cleaning as usual. But Ryan stayed at the table, watching her closely. He noticed the sleeves of her uniform shift slightly, revealing more bruises, small ones, old ones, and a few still dark blue. He stood up, walked over, and said gently, "Sira, who did that too?" "You." She froze, her hands tightening around the plate. "I won't be angry," he added. "I just want to understand." Zero looked up at him with wide, scared eyes. And then, for the first time, she spoke, a whisper, barely audible. "Don't send me back." That was all, just those 4 words. Ryan felt something inside him shift, break, and rebuild in that moment. He knelt down and said, "I won't, Zira. I promise." She stared at him, lips trembling, then nodded and returned to washing quietly. That night, he left the door to the guest room open and turned on the heater. He didn't say anything, just left it there. in case she chose comfort over fear, at midnight. Ryan woke up to the soft sound of a blanket being dragged across the floor. He didn't open his eyes, but he smiled in the dark. She didn't speak much, but he heard her loud and clear, and somehow, in her silence, he felt less alone than ever before. He didn't know why, but he was starting to care, not just because she worked hard or stayed quiet, but because when she sat by the stars, when she whispered in fear, when she ate silently beside him, he saw someone real, someone strong. She was tiny, quiet, and wounded, but in her silence, she carried a whole world, and Ryan was slowly falling into it, one quiet moment at a time. The days passed slowly on the mining outpost. The machines outside roared, as usual. The dust settled, as usual. But something inside Ryan's quarters had changed. Zero no longer avoided the table. At dinner, she still didn't talk much, but now she looked at him, really looked. And Ryan found himself waiting for her smile, the small one she gave when he tried to cook. She had started humming sometimes while she worked. Soft tunes from her world, strange and beautiful. Like wind through hollow trees, it felt like a home, finally. But something didn't feel right underneath it all. Something about her eyes, still alert, still afraid, even when she smiled, one evening. Ryan searched for his old scanner unit. He had left it near the back wall. Behind the kitchen, in the storage area, he moved some crates and tools. Then saw it half covered by a dusty cloth as he reached to grab it. His boot hit something hollow. A soft metallic echo came from beneath. He knelt and brushed the dust away, revealing a square panel, a hidden hatch. Ryan frowned. He had lived there for over a year and never noticed it. He tugged at the edges, and with a low creak, the hatch opened. A narrow crawl space led downward into darkness. He grabbed a light and slowly climbed down. The air smelled like rust and old metal. Wires dangled from the ceiling. Broken shelves lined the walls. At the far end, something blinked a red light, steady and silent. He walked toward it and found a small black box attached to the wall, a tracker connected to a long-range signal booster. His heart tightened. Someone had been monitoring this place, watching them, watching her. He turned around quickly and there she was. Zero stood at the entrance of the crawlspace, her small body shaking. Her eyes wide with fear, not of the darkness, but of him. "Please," she whispered. "Don't tell them." Ryan moved slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Zira, what is this?" he asked, gently. She stepped into the room and looked down, ashamed. "They said if I ran, they would track me, punish me." Her voice broke as she continued. "I didn't want to come." Her rye was sold, traded like junk, her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to disappear. "I didn't know you were kind," she whispered. "I thought you'd be like them." Ryan walked closer and knelt in front of her. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "I didn't know about this. I believe you," she whispered, barely audible. Her hands reached out and touched the wall. "Where the tracker was, I couldn't remove it," she said. "They said if I did, they'd find me faster." Ryan stared at the device, then at her. "I can destroy it," he said. "They won't trace you again." Zero looked up sharply. "But they'll come if the signal stops. They'll know I found it." Ryan stood slowly, mind already planning. "Then we'll be ready," he said. That night, they sat in silence near the fire unit. Zira clutched a warm blanket around her body, still tense. Ryan placed a hot drink beside her this time. She took it with both hands. "You risk yourself," she whispered. "Why?" He looked at her, into her deep, sad eyes, and said, "Because I've been broken to Zira. I know what it's like to be used, to be forgotten." She blinked slowly and then said, "You remember the war? I fought in it." He answered, "I lost too much." They sat there, two souls scarred by different battles. But connected by quiet pain, Ryan stood and walked to a shelf, pulled down a small device, a jammer. He placed it beside the hatch and pressed a button. The blinking red light stopped. Zira gasped softly, a hand to her mouth. Ryan turned to her and said, "We just went dark." She didn't move for a moment, then stood and walked to him with slow, careful hands. She touched his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." "I think I do," he replied, as she looked up at him, her eyes no longer filled with fear. Something new passed between them, not just safety, not just survival, something warmer. Something that made Ryan's heart beat a little faster. She was still. A stranger, still a mystery, but now she wasn't alone, and neither was he. The red light never blinked again. And for the first time since she arrived, Zero didn't check over her shoulder every 5 minutes. She moved more freely now, not fast, not loud, but without the fear that used to follow her. Ryan noticed it in the small things, how she no longer flinched when he entered a room, how her shoulders relaxed when she walked, how her breathing sounded just a little deeper. It was like watching a caged animal slowly remember what open space felt like. Ryan had spent years alone in this place, just machines, reports, and silence. Now, he listened for her hum, for the sound of her feet tapping lightly across the floor. One morning, she came into the control room holding a strange bowl. It was Maid. Of metal curved in a design Ryan didn't recognize. She placed it gently on the table, her fingers gliding over the edge. "What's this?" he asked, leaning forward. Zero didn't speak at first. She simply opened a small pouch and poured in blue seeds. Then she added water, and something that looked like stardust. The mixture shimmered softly, releasing a faint floral scent. "This is food from my world," she said quietly. "I want you to try." Ryan blinked. Touched that she had cooked something for him. He took a small spoonful and tasted its cool, smooth, slightly sweet with a touch of mint. He smiled. "That's actually good." Zero gave him a small grin, the corners of her mouth lifting with pride. She sat across from him and waited while he ate. Like watching him enjoy it brought her joy too. That night, Ryan repaired the broken heater in the guest room himself. He didn't say anything, just left it on. The door open with a soft blanket folded on the bed. When he woke the next morning, he found the blanket unfolded, the pillow slightly dented. Zero had slept there, and that tiny detail made his chest feel warm in a way he didn't know how to explain. The days that followed felt lighter. Zira taught him a few words in her language. Simple things like thank you, warm, and safe. He repeated them clumsily, and she laughed softly when he got the sound wrong. In return, she practiced his words, her voice still shaky, but willing. They planted small alien seeds in pots by the window. Her idea, she explained that if they bloomed, the air would smell sweeter, and both of them would sleep better. Ryan didn't care much about flowers, but he liked the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about them one evening as they watched the stars from the old bench outside. Zero wrapped her thin blanket around her shoulders and looked up quietly. "My people were known for silence," she said. "We believe words lose meaning if used too much." Ryan glanced at her and nodded. "You say more with your eyes than most people say with full speeches." She smiled at that and whispered, "And you hear more than most humans I've met?" He chuckled, then grew quiet, his voice soft. "I don't know why, but I feel better when you're near." Zira didn't answer right away, but she leaned just slightly against him, and in that shared silence, under the stars, it felt like they were breathing the same air, not just surviving, but living together. The next day, she surprised him again. He entered the kitchen and found a hand-drawn map laid out on the table. Stars, paths, and symbols he didn't recognize. Zira pointed at a corner. My home was here, she said softly. It's gone now, Ryan. Looked at the small mark on the map, a bright green circle with a blue outline. War? He asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded, her voice breaking. I was taken after the last blast. Ryan swallowed hard, unsure what to say. He gently placed his hand over the map, covering the mark. You don't have to go back there, he said. This can be your new home. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked quickly, hiding the tears. I don't know how to be free, she said, but I want to learn. He looked at her and said, then we'll learn together. Later that evening, he caught himself staring at her as she arranged small flowers near the window. She turned and smiled at him, warm and honest, and Ryan realized he no longer saw her as just someone who cleaned his house. She was his friend, maybe more. Someone who had lived in fear, yet still offered kindness. Someone who had no reason to trust, yet chose to stay, and slowly, without either of them saying it out loud, they were learning to breathe together. The morning was calm, too calm. Ryan stood on the edge of the dock platform, staring at the sky. As a transport ship descended slowly, dust swirled as the engines hummed, louder and closer with each second. Zero stood behind him, quiet but alert. She had learned to read his mood without words, and today his shoulders were tight. His eyes narrowed. This supply ship came early, Ryan said, his voice low. No alert, no request. Zero stepped back, her hand tightening around the edge of her shawl. The shuttle landed with a hiss. The door slid open. Two men walked out. One was a tall human with a datapad. The other was the traitor. Zira gasped. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him. The same man who delivered her. The one who called her property. Her body froze, and she trembled where she stood. Ryan stepped in front of her, his voice cold now. You weren't expected, he said to the traitor. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Commander Ryan, pleasure to see you, he said. We've come to collect what belongs to our network. Zero stepped back, heart pounding. Ryan didn't move. She doesn't belong to you. The traitor held up a contract. Smug, she was transferred under temporary service. He said, and now that contract is void, she must return. Zero whispered, please. Her voice shaking, I don't want to go. Ryan's jaw tightened. This isn't a prison. The man chuckled. No, but it can become one. If the Galactic Labor Board hears about unauthorized holding of alien assets, Zero looked like a bird about to fly into a storm. Her legs were trembling, and she gripped the corner of Ryan's coat like a child lost in a crowd. I'll go, she said suddenly, her voice flat. Ryan turned to her, shocked. No. If I stay, they'll hurt you, she said, not crying, just hollow. I can't let you be punished for me. The traitor took a step forward. Reaching out, Ryan's hand shot up, palm open. Don't, he warned. The traitor paused, then laughed. You're becoming quite attached to her. Is that what this is? He smirked. A pet you feed, and now want to keep. Ryan's fist clenched, but he held back. He turned to Zira, speaking gently. You don't belong to anyone, not anymore. She looked up at him, eyes full of something deeper than fear trust. The moment froze, a decision hanging in the air. Then, Ryan stepped forward and tore the contract in half. I don't care what the law says, he said, voice low and steady. She stays. The traitor's face twisted in fury. You'll regret this, he hissed. He turned and stormed back to the ship with his assistant. But just before the hatch closed, he shouted over his shoulder, I'll be back with proof. With orders and she'll be dragged out if I have to bring 10 enforcers. Then the ship lifted and vanished into the sky. Zero stood frozen for a long time. Then slowly collapsed to her knees. I tried to be quiet, she whispered. I tried not to cause trouble. You didn't, Ryan said, kneeling beside her. He's the one who brings trouble. She looked at him, lips trembling. They always come back. Ryan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then we'll be ready, back inside. Ryan activated the defense shields, reinforced the entry locks, and scanned for long-range signals. Zero watched him silently. Standing in the corner like a ghost from the past, later, Ryan brought her a warm drink and sat beside her on the floor. She didn't take the cup right away. Instead, she looked at him and asked, "Why do you protect me?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the fire, then back at her. "Because someone should have protected you long ago," he said. "And because when I see you scared, I feel something I thought I lost years ago." Zero blinked, slowly, her voice soft. "What's that?" "Purpose," Ryan whispered, "and something like care." She held the cup now, not drinking yet, but her fingers didn't shake this time. They sat quietly, breathing the same air, listening to the quiet hum of the bass. Outside, the stars looked peaceful, but war was returning this time not with armies, but with orders and threats. And yet, in that small room, beside the heater and the glow of soft lights, Zero wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. They were no longer just a man and a maid. They were something stronger now, something worth fighting for. 3 nights passed in silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence before a storm. Ryan checked the sensors every hour, his eyes tired, but his hands steady. Zero didn't sleep much either. She tried to act normal, cooking, cleaning, watering the alien flowers near the window. But Ryan could see the fear behind her soft smile. She flinched when the wind made the roof creak. She looked toward the door whenever the comes. Blinked. They both knew something was coming, and when it came hard. Early morning, alarms screamed through the base. A fast approaching ship cut through the sky, dropping fast like a hawk hunting prey. "Enforcer model," Ryan said, looking at the screen. Zero stood behind him, holding her arms tightly around her chest. "They're here for me," she whispered. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "They won't take you." He opened the weapons locker. Something he hadn't done in years. His old gear still worked: rifle, shields, defense, drones. He handed her a small pulse blade, her hand shaking as she took it. "I don't know how to fight," she said, voice trembling. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just stay behind me." But Zira shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I won't run again." The Enforcer ship landed with a heavy thud, shaking the ground. Its doors opened, and armored figures marched out for soldiers. And the same traitor from before. This time, he wasn't smiling. "This is official," he shouted, holding a document. "You are harboring stolen property." Ryan stepped forward, his rifle charged. "She's not property," he said calmly. "She's free." The traitor sneered. "That's not your decision." "It is now," Ryan replied, and tapped the trigger gently. The soldiers raised their weapons, and the first shot cracked the silence. The battle began. Blasts flew across the air, hitting shields and walls. Ryan moved like he hadn't in years, dodging, firing, setting traps. Zero crouched behind cover, eyes wide, hands gripping the blade tightly. Then one of the soldiers circled around, aiming at Ryan's back. Zero screamed, jumped from cover, and slashed wildly. The blade hit the soldier's leg, just enough to knock him down. Ryan turned in time and fired one clean shot. Zero stood there, shaking blood on her hands, but eyes burning with something new. Strength. 2 more soldiers went down, and the traitor shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" But Ryan didn't stop. "You wanted to take her," he growled. "Then you should have come ready to die." The final soldier dropped his weapon and ran. The traitor stumbling behind him. The ship lifted into the air, disappearing into the clouds. The battle was over, but the silence afterward was louder than the fight. Zero dropped the blade and sank to her knees, breathing hard. Ryan rushed to her, kneeling down. "You're hurt." She shook her head, just scared. He placed his arms around her gently, not as a protector this time, but as someone who knew what fear truly was, and what courage meant when it came from love. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," she said, her voice cracking, "but I couldn't let them take you either." Ryan looked at her, heart pounding. "You weren't protecting me," he whispered. "You were standing up for yourself. I've never seen someone braver." She looked up, tears in her large eyes. "I was just a maid, a servant," she said. "I didn't think I mattered." "You matter to me," Ryan replied, his voice shaking. "You've mattered since the first time I saw you trying to smile in the dark." The day passed in quiet repair. They fixed the damage to the roof, cleaned up the broken tools, patched the walls. But something had changed between them. Something deep and unspoken. That night, Zira didn't go to her room. She sat beside Ryan on the bench, wrapped in a blanket, her head resting softly on his arm. "I don't want to go anywhere," she whispered, "even if they come again." He looked at her and said the words he'd been holding in his heart. "You're not just someone I protected," he said. "You're someone I care for deeply." She smiled, her tiny hand finding his. "I care too," she said. "More than I ever thought possible." And in that fragile moment, wrapped in stars and soft silence, they weren't fighter and maid, soldier and refugee. They were just two hearts that had finally found their way. Together, the wind outside was gentle. It carried the soft scent of alien flowers blooming by the window. Zira stood quietly in the kitchen, hands moving slowly as she arranged the morning meal. She no longer hid in corners, no longer kept her head low. She moved with peace now. And peace looked beautiful on her. Ryan watched her from the doorway, arms folded, eyes calm. It had been 2 weeks since the attack. No more ships came. No more threats, just silence, kind, healing silence. Zero noticed him watching and turned with a soft smile. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice still quiet, but full of warmth. He nodded, stepping into the room. She poured the drink into his favorite metal mug, then sat across from him at the table. They ate together like it was something they had always done. No tension, no fear, just two people starting a day they both chose. "I had a dream last night," she said softly. Ryan looked up, interested. "What was it about?" "I was back home," she said, staring at the table, "but it wasn't the same. The sky was wrong. The trees were quiet, and I couldn't feel the wind." She paused, then looked at him. It didn't feel like home. He waited, letting her speak her thoughts. "But then you were there," she said, her lips curving into a small smile. "And I knew home isn't a place anymore. It's where I can sleep without fear, where I can speak without being punished, where I can wake up and see someone who cares if I'm still breathing." Ryan didn't say anything. For a while, his throat tightened, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You gave me that too," he said. "You gave me something to care about again. I didn't even know I was alive before you walked into my door." Zero reached across the table, her hand finding his. Her fingers were still small, still delicate, but they held strength now. The strength of someone who had survived too much and was still learning how to live. After breakfast, they worked together on a small project. Ryan had started building a garden box just outside the main door. Zero helped pick the alien soil mix, using seeds from the flowers she once brought. He didn't know if they would grow in this dry wind, but he liked trying because she believed they would. "Flowers remind me of us," she said, placing a seed into the soft soil. "We come from different worlds. We were placed in a place not meant for growing." "But look," she said, smiling as the sun touched her skin. "We're still trying." Ryan wiped sweat from his brow, watching her with a soft heart. Maybe the stars sent you to me," he said without thinking. Zero looked at him for a long moment, her eyes wide but not afraid. Then she said, "Or maybe we both wandered so far that we finally landed in the same place." Later that evening, they sat on the bench again. The one outside where the stars were bright and the air felt lighter. Zero curled beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. She whispered, "You never asked why I was sold. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to," Ryan replied gently. "I was small," she said. "The last of my group. They said I was too weak to be useful, too quiet to entertain, so they traded me for spare parts." Her voice didn't shake when she said it. It was a wound long sealed, but still part of her. Ryan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "They were wrong," he said. "You were never weak. You cleaned my house, yes, but you also cleaned my heart. You fixed things inside me that even war couldn't touch." Zero blinked, her lashes wet. "I never thought I would hear words like that," she whispered. "Not for me. You deserve every one of them," he said. That night, they didn't go to separate rooms. They stayed together in the warmth of each other's presence. They didn't rush, didn't speak of forever. But they both knew this was something real. She had come to his home with empty hands, but she brought more than any weapon or machine could offer. She brought feeling. She taught a lonely soldier how to laugh again, how to care, how to love, and Ryan, who had once believed his heart was buried under years of dust and war, now felt it beating again. Because of a tiny alien maid who came with cold eyes and left with his heart in her hands.